Question 1. Benchmark analysis indicates that organizations are increasingly leveraging VMware Area Automation for infrastructure provisioning and management. Considering the regulatory landscape for this exam's jurisdiction, which of the following approaches best ensures that the deployment and operation of VMware Area Automation adhere to all applicable compliance mandates? Option A. Implement comprehensive logging and auditing mechanisms within VMware Area Automation to continuously monitor for deviations from established compliance policies and regulatory requirements, and establish a process for regular review and remediation of any identified noncompliance. Option B. Prioritize the rapid deployment of VMware Area Automation to realize immediate operational efficiencies, with a plan to address any compliance concerns through post-deployment audits and subsequent manual adjustments. Option C. Integrate regulatory compliance requirements directly into the design and configuration of VMware Area Automation blueprints, policies, and workflows, supported by automated validation checks and continuous monitoring. Option D. Rely on the inherent security features of VMware Area Automation and assume that its default configurations are sufficient to meet all regulatory obligations without further specific configuration or validation. The correct answer is A. Implement comprehensive logging and auditing mechanisms within VMware Area Automation to continuously monitor for deviations from established compliance policies and regulatory requirements, and establish a process for regular review and remediation of any identified noncompliance. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the operational efficiency gains offered by VMware Area Automation with the stringent regulatory compliance requirements of the specified jurisdiction. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that the automation processes, while designed for speed and consistency, do not inadvertently introduce or exacerbate compliance risks. Careful judgment is required to identify and mitigate these risks without stifling innovation or hindering the intended benefits of the automation platform. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively integrates regulatory considerations into the design and implementation of VMware Area Automation. By establishing clear policies, conducting thorough risk assessments, and implementing continuous monitoring, organizations can ensure that their automated workflows adhere to all applicable laws and guidelines. This approach demonstrates a commitment to responsible technology adoption and minimizes the likelihood of regulatory penalties or reputational damage. Specifically, it aligns with the principle of compliance by design, ensuring that regulatory adherence is a foundational element rather than an afterthought. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical implementation without considering regulatory impact is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of due diligence and a disregard for legal obligations. Such an approach risks creating automated processes that violate data privacy laws, security mandates, or industry-specific regulations, leading to significant fines, legal action, and loss of trust. Another incorrect approach that relies on post-implementation audits as the sole method of ensuring compliance is also flawed. While audits are important, they are reactive. Relying on them exclusively means that violations may occur and persist undetected for a period, increasing the potential for harm and regulatory scrutiny. This approach fails to embrace a proactive and preventative compliance strategy. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed of deployment over thorough validation of compliance controls is equally problematic. This demonstrates a misjudgment of priorities, where short-term gains are valued more highly than long-term legal and ethical standing. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a multi-stakeholder approach. First, identify all relevant regulatory frameworks applicable to the organization's operations and the specific use case of VMware Area Automation. Second, conduct a comprehensive risk assessment that maps potential compliance gaps to the automation workflows. Third, design and implement controls within Area Automation to mitigate identified risks, prioritizing compliance by design. Fourth, establish robust monitoring and auditing mechanisms to ensure ongoing adherence. Finally, foster a culture of continuous improvement where compliance is an integral part of the technology lifecycle. Question 2. The monitoring system demonstrates an anomaly related to a specific VMware Area Automation service, indicating a potential performance degradation. What is the most appropriate initial response to ensure operational integrity and compliance? Option A. Immediately initiate a diagnostic investigation by correlating the alert with other system metrics, logs, and recent configuration changes within VMware Area Automation to identify the root cause before taking corrective action. Option B. Proceed with an immediate restart of the affected VMware Area Automation service to restore normal operation, assuming this will resolve the anomaly. Option C. Classify the alert as low priority and defer investigation until it directly impacts end-user functionality or escalates significantly. Option D. Escalate the alert directly to the VMware vendor support team for their immediate analysis and resolution, without performing any internal diagnostics. Correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a diagnostic investigation by correlating the alert with other system metrics, logs, and recent configuration changes within VMware Area Automation to identify the root cause before taking corrective action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with data integrity and compliance. The challenge lies in interpreting monitoring alerts within the context of VMware Area Automation's capabilities and understanding the potential downstream impacts of different response strategies on service availability and auditability. Careful judgment is required to avoid unnecessary disruptions while ensuring that critical issues are addressed promptly and appropriately. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and data-driven investigation before taking corrective action. This aligns with the principles of responsible IT operations and adherence to service-level agreements, SLAs. By correlating the alert with other system metrics and logs, the administrator can accurately diagnose the root cause, minimizing the risk of unintended consequences from premature or incorrect interventions. This methodical approach ensures that actions taken are justified, documented, and contribute to the overall stability and reliability of the automated environment, which is crucial for maintaining stakeholder trust and meeting regulatory expectations for system uptime and performance. An incorrect approach that involves immediately restarting the affected service without investigation is professionally unacceptable. This action bypasses the critical step of root cause analysis, potentially masking underlying issues that could resurface or lead to more severe problems later. From a regulatory and ethical standpoint, this approach fails to demonstrate due diligence in maintaining system integrity and could violate internal policies or external compliance requirements that mandate proper incident management and problem resolution. It also risks disrupting other dependent services, leading to service degradation or outages, and can hinder effective troubleshooting by obscuring the original cause of the alert. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the alert if it does not immediately impact end users, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of proactive system management and a disregard for potential future impacts. Ignoring alerts, even if seemingly benign at the moment, can lead to the accumulation of technical debt and can result in more significant failures down the line. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold the responsibility of maintaining a healthy and secure IT environment. Regulatory frameworks often require timely detection and remediation of potential issues to prevent data loss, security breaches, or service disruptions, all of which could be exacerbated by neglecting monitoring alerts. A third incorrect approach, which involves escalating the alert to a vendor without initial internal investigation, is also professionally unsound. While vendor support is valuable, it should be a step taken after reasonable internal troubleshooting has been performed. This approach can lead to unnecessary delays and costs, as the vendor may require the same diagnostic information that could have been gathered internally. It also represents a failure to leverage internal expertise and can be seen as an abdication of responsibility for initial problem assessment, potentially impacting the organization's ability to meet its own internal operational standards and compliance obligations related to incident response efficiency. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a tiered approach to incident response. First, acknowledge and categorize the alert based on its severity and potential impact. Second, gather contextual information by correlating the alert with other relevant monitoring data, logs, and system events. Third, perform a root cause analysis to identify the underlying issue. Fourth, develop and implement a remediation plan, prioritizing actions that minimize disruption and risk. Fifth, document all actions taken and their outcomes for audit and future reference. Finally, review the incident to identify opportunities for process improvement and preventative measures. This structured approach ensures that responses are effective, efficient, and compliant with professional standards and regulatory requirements. Question 3. The performance metrics show a significant increase in latency for VMware Aria automation deployments. Which of the following approaches best addresses this issue while adhering to professional risk management principles? Option A. Immediately revert all recent configuration changes to the VMware Aria automation environment to a previously stable state without further analysis. Option B. Implement a series of unverified, quick-fix solutions based on common troubleshooting guides found online. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential root causes and evaluate the impact and likelihood of various remediation strategies before implementing any changes. Option D. Escalate the issue to the vendor's premium support team without performing any initial diagnostics or risk evaluation. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential root causes and evaluate the impact and likelihood of various remediation strategies before implementing any changes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in cloud environments where performance degradation can have significant business implications. The challenge lies in accurately identifying the root cause of the performance issues within a complex, multi-layered system like VMware Aria automation, and then implementing appropriate remediation without introducing new risks or violating established operational policies. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to hasty decisions, making a structured risk assessment crucial. Correct approach analysis. A systematic risk assessment, focusing on identifying potential impacts and likelihood of various remediation strategies, represents best professional practice. This approach aligns with general IT governance principles and the implicit requirement within any professional IT framework to manage change and mitigate risk. Specifically, for VMware Aria automation, this means understanding how changes to underlying infrastructure, network configurations, or the automation platform itself could affect service delivery. The correct approach prioritizes understanding the potential consequences of any proposed fix before implementation, ensuring that the solution does not create a worse problem. This proactive stance is essential for maintaining service availability and integrity, which are core tenets of professional IT operations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately reverting to a previous known good configuration without assessing the current state or the impact of the rollback. This fails to acknowledge that the performance issue might be due to a new, unaddressed factor, or that the rollback itself could cause data loss or service interruption if not carefully managed. This bypasses a critical risk assessment step, potentially leading to unintended consequences and violating the principle of controlled change management. Another incorrect approach is to implement a series of uncoordinated, ad hoc changes based on anecdotal evidence or common troubleshooting steps. This lacks a structured methodology and significantly increases the risk of introducing further instability. Each unverified change represents a potential new failure point, and without a risk assessment, the likelihood of exacerbating the problem or causing new ones is high, deviating from professional standards of systematic problem solving and risk mitigation. A third incorrect approach is to escalate the issue to a higher support tier without performing any initial diagnostic or risk evaluation. While escalation is sometimes necessary, doing so without any preliminary assessment means that the higher tier support is also operating without a clear understanding of the potential risks associated with various solutions. This delays effective resolution and can be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence in troubleshooting and risk management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the problem and its potential impact. This involves gathering data, performing initial diagnostics, and then conducting a risk assessment for each potential solution. The risk assessment should consider the likelihood of the solution resolving the issue, the potential negative impacts if it fails, and the effort and resources required. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, risks are managed, and the chosen solution is the most appropriate and least disruptive. Question 4. The audit findings indicate that recent modifications to several VMware area automation blueprints and associated policies were implemented without a formal, documented process to evaluate their potential effects on existing deployed services and the overall security posture. Which of the following represents the most appropriate professional response to address this finding and prevent recurrence? Option A. Document the recent changes and their observed effects, and then proceed with implementing new changes as they arise, relying on post-implementation monitoring to identify issues. Option B. Advise the team to be more careful in the future and to verbally discuss potential impacts with colleagues before making changes. Option C. Focus on optimizing the performance of the VMware Area Automation platform and assume that any changes to blueprints and policies will inherently improve or maintain the current operational state. Option D. Implement a mandatory, multi-stage impact assessment process for all proposed changes to VMware Area Automation components, requiring sign-off from relevant stakeholders, including security and operations teams, before any deployment. The correct answer is D. Implement a mandatory multi-stage impact assessment process for all proposed changes to VMware Area Automation components, requiring sign-off from relevant stakeholders, including security and operations teams, before any deployment. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential gap in the organization's approach to assessing the impact of changes within VMware Area Automation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a proactive and thorough understanding of how modifications to automation workflows, blueprints, or policies could inadvertently disrupt existing services or introduce security vulnerabilities. The absence of a robust impact assessment process can lead to unforeseen downtime, compliance issues, and increased operational costs. The correct approach, which involves a structured and documented impact assessment prior to implementing changes, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the principles of change management and risk mitigation, ensuring that all potential consequences are identified and addressed. By systematically evaluating the scope, dependencies, and potential downstream effects of a change, organizations can make informed decisions, implement appropriate testing, and develop effective rollback plans. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of negative outcomes and supports the stable and secure operation of the automation platform, adhering to general IT governance best practices that are implicitly expected in professional environments. An incorrect approach that bypasses a formal impact assessment or relies on ad hoc, undocumented evaluations represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such practices can lead to noncompliance with internal policies and potentially external regulations if the changes affect data integrity or service availability. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the potential negative consequences on users and the business. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the technical feasibility of a change without considering its broader operational or security implications, is also professionally unacceptable. This narrow focus ignores the interconnectedness of IT systems and the potential for cascading failures, violating the professional responsibility to consider the holistic impact of any IT modification. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a structured change management process. This involves clearly defining the scope of any proposed change, identifying all stakeholders, conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that considers technical, operational, security, and business implications, developing a detailed implementation plan with rollback procedures, and obtaining necessary approvals before proceeding. Regular review and refinement of this process are crucial to ensure its continued effectiveness. Question 5. Governance review demonstrates that a new VMware Area Automation capability, designed to automate the deployment of complex multi-tier applications with advanced networking configurations, has been identified as a potential accelerator for development teams. However, the existing governance framework lacks specific guidelines for evaluating and approving such advanced automation features. The team is seeking guidance on the most appropriate approach to integrate this capability responsibly. Option A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, including security and compliance impact analysis, and develop clear operational guidelines and integration points with existing governance policies before full deployment. Option B. Defer the decision to integrate the new capability until a comprehensive overhaul of the entire governance framework is completed, which may take an extended period. Option C. Implement the capability on a trial basis for a single team without formal documentation or integration into the broader governance framework, relying on individual team expertise. Option D. Immediately deploy the capability to development teams to capitalize on the perceived acceleration benefits, with a plan to address governance concerns retrospectively. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough risk assessment, including security and compliance impact analysis, and develop clear operational guidelines and integration points with existing governance policies before full deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud governance, where the rapid adoption of new services outpaces the formalization of policies and controls. The challenge lies in balancing the agility and innovation offered by VMware Aria Automation with the imperative to maintain security, compliance, and operational stability. Without a clear decision-making framework, teams may resort to ad hoc solutions, leading to technical debt, security vulnerabilities, and increased risk. The professional challenge is to establish a structured, repeatable process for evaluating and integrating new capabilities in a way that aligns with organizational objectives and regulatory requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive, risk-based evaluation aligned with established governance principles. This involves understanding the intended use of the new capability, assessing its potential impact on existing security and compliance postures, and ensuring it integrates seamlessly with the overall VMware Aria Automation architecture and organizational policies. This aligns with best professional practice by prioritizing due diligence, risk mitigation, and strategic alignment. From a regulatory perspective, this approach supports adherence to principles of accountability, transparency, and due diligence, which are foundational to many compliance frameworks. It ensures that technology adoption is a controlled and informed process, rather than a reactive one. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the technical feasibility and immediate benefits without considering broader implications. This can lead to the adoption of tools or configurations that introduce security gaps, violate data privacy regulations, or create operational silos. This approach fails to meet regulatory requirements for risk assessment and impact analysis, potentially exposing the organization to breaches and noncompliance penalties. Another incorrect approach involves deferring the decision indefinitely due to perceived complexity or lack of immediate resources. This leads to a stagnation of innovation and can result in teams seeking shadow IT solutions, which are inherently less secure and harder to manage. This inaction represents a failure in proactive governance and risk management, potentially violating regulatory mandates that require timely assessment and mitigation of technological risks. A third incorrect approach is to implement the new capability without any formal documentation or integration into existing operational procedures. This creates a knowledge gap, hinders troubleshooting, and makes auditing and compliance verification extremely difficult. This directly contravenes regulatory expectations for clear documentation, auditable processes, and effective change management. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making framework that includes stages for identifying the need, evaluating potential solutions against predefined criteria, including security, compliance, cost, and operational impact, piloting and testing, formal approval, and ongoing monitoring. This framework should be iterative and adaptable, allowing for the integration of new capabilities while maintaining a strong governance posture. When faced with new service introductions in VMware Aria Automation, professionals should ask, does this capability align with our defined security policies and compliance obligations? What are the potential risks, and how can they be mitigated? How does this integrate with our existing automation workflows and governance processes? Question 6. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in blueprint deployment failures and a significant elongation of the time required to provision virtual machines through VMware Aria Automation. What is the most effective approach to address these performance degradations? Option A. Temporarily disable all blueprint testing and validation gates to accelerate the deployment process. Option B. Immediately allocate additional compute and memory resources to the VMware Aria Automation appliance and its underlying vSphere infrastructure. Option C. Focus exclusively on optimizing the performance of individual vRealize orchestrator workflows without considering their integration into the broader blueprint deployment process. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of blueprint design, vRealize orchestrator workflow efficiency, and resource reservation configurations to identify and rectify process bottlenecks. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of blueprint design, vRealize orchestrator workflow efficiency, and resource reservation configurations to identify and rectify process bottlenecks. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The performance metrics indicate a significant increase in blueprint deployment times and a corresponding rise in resource provisioning errors within VMware Aria automation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the efficiency and reliability of cloud service delivery, potentially leading to increased operational costs, user dissatisfaction, and security vulnerabilities if not addressed promptly and effectively. The pressure to resolve these issues quickly, while maintaining service availability and adhering to established operational procedures, requires a nuanced understanding of process optimization within the Aria automation framework. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on a systematic, data-driven investigation of the entire blueprint lifecycle, from design and testing to deployment and post-provisioning validation. This involves analyzing the complexity of blueprints, the efficiency of vRealize orchestrator workflows, the performance of integrated vSphere resources, and the effectiveness of approval policies. By identifying bottlenecks and inefficiencies at each stage and implementing targeted improvements such as blueprint modularization, workflow optimization, and resource allocation adjustments, best professional practice is upheld. This aligns with the principles of continuous improvement and operational excellence, ensuring that the automation platform delivers on its promise of speed, scalability, and reliability. Adherence to documented operational procedures and change management protocols is paramount to avoid introducing new issues. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately increasing the allocated compute resources for the Aria automation infrastructure without a thorough root cause analysis. This is professionally unacceptable as it represents a reactive, brute force solution that fails to address the underlying process inefficiencies. It can lead to unnecessary expenditure, mask deeper architectural or workflow problems, and potentially violate cost management policies by over-provisioning. Another incorrect approach is to bypass established testing and validation procedures for new or modified blueprints to expedite deployments. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It increases the risk of deploying faulty configurations, leading to service disruptions, data corruption, and security breaches. It directly contravenes best practices for change management and risk mitigation, which are often implicitly or explicitly governed by organizational policies and potentially industry standards for IT service management. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on optimizing individual vRealize orchestrator workflows in isolation, without considering their impact on the overall blueprint deployment process or the underlying infrastructure. This siloed optimization can lead to unintended consequences, such as creating new bottlenecks elsewhere in the deployment pipeline or placing undue strain on dependent systems. It demonstrates a lack of holistic process understanding and can result in suboptimal outcomes for the entire system. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured problem-solving methodology. This begins with clearly defining the problem based on performance metrics. Next, a hypothesis should be formed regarding the potential root causes, considering all aspects of the Aria automation lifecycle. Data collection and analysis should then be performed to validate or refute these hypotheses. Based on the findings, a prioritized list of optimization strategies should be developed, focusing on those that offer the greatest impact with acceptable risk. Implementation should follow strict change management procedures, including thorough testing and rollback plans. Finally, continuous monitoring and feedback loops are essential to ensure sustained performance improvements and to identify new optimization opportunities. Question 7. Assessment of the most effective strategy for integrating new self-service virtual machine blueprints into a VMware Aria automation environment, considering the diverse needs of development teams seeking rapid deployment and the security and compliance teams requiring adherence to strict regulatory frameworks. Option A. Implement a continuous integration and continuous delivery (CI/CD) pipeline for blueprint development that includes automated security scanning, compliance checks against predefined policies, and staged approvals before deployment to production environments. Option B. Prioritize the deployment of all new blueprints to production immediately to meet development team timelines, and address any security or compliance findings as they arise through ad hoc remediation efforts. Option C. Allow development teams to deploy blueprints directly to production environments after initial functional testing, with security and compliance reviews conducted retrospectively on a quarterly basis. Option D. Develop blueprints in isolation by development teams and provide them to the security and compliance teams for a one-time review before they are made available for self-service deployment. The correct answer is A. Implement a continuous integration and continuous delivery (SI/CD) pipeline for blueprint development that includes automated security scanning, compliance checks against predefined policies, and staged approvals before deployment to production environments. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation projects, balancing the desire for rapid deployment and innovation with the imperative to maintain robust security and compliance. The stakeholder perspective is critical here because different groups have varying priorities and risk tolerances. A technically sound solution might be unacceptable to security or compliance teams, leading to project delays or even security breaches. The challenge lies in understanding these diverse perspectives and finding a solution that satisfies all critical requirements. The correct approach prioritizes a phased implementation that integrates security and compliance checks early and continuously. This aligns with best practices in DevSecOps and the principle of shift-left security, where security considerations are addressed from the outset of the development lifecycle. By involving security and compliance stakeholders in the design and testing phases, and by automating policy enforcement within Aria automation, the organization can achieve agility without compromising its security posture or regulatory adherence. This proactive integration ensures that new services and infrastructure are deployed in a compliant and secure manner from the beginning, minimizing the risk of costly remediation later. An incorrect approach that bypasses or delays security and compliance reviews introduces significant regulatory and ethical risks. For instance, deploying services without proper security hardening or compliance validation could lead to data breaches, unauthorized access, or violations of data privacy regulations. This failure to adhere to established security policies and regulatory mandates is not only professionally negligent, but also exposes the organization to legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. Furthermore, ignoring the concerns of security and compliance teams creates an adversarial relationship, hindering future collaboration, and potentially leading to a fragmented and insecure IT environment. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes stakeholder engagement, risk assessment, and iterative development. This involves clearly identifying all relevant stakeholders, understanding their requirements and concerns, and establishing a shared understanding of project goals and constraints. A thorough risk assessment should be conducted for each proposed solution, considering potential security vulnerabilities, compliance gaps, and operational impacts. The chosen approach should then be implemented iteratively, with continuous feedback loops from all stakeholders to ensure alignment and address emerging issues proactively. This collaborative and risk-aware process is essential for delivering successful and compliant cloud automation solutions. Question 8. Comparative studies suggest that when integrating third-party services into VMware Aria automation workflows, the most effective strategy for ensuring both operational efficiency and adherence to security and compliance mandates involves a multifaceted approach. Considering the potential risks associated with external dependencies, which of the following represents the most robust and professionally responsible method for integrating a new third-party service? Option A. Proceed with the integration immediately, assuming the third-party vendor's reputation is sufficient assurance of their security and compliance posture. Option B. Implement the integration after a brief review of the vendor's marketing collateral and a cursory check of their website for any mention of security certifications. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive security assessment of the third-party integration, including vulnerability scanning and access control verification, alongside establishing clear communication protocols and SLAs with the vendor for security incident response. Option D. Integrate the service based solely on the vendor's self-provided documentation and assurances of compliance, without any independent verification or technical assessment. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive security assessment of the third-party integration, including vulnerability scanning and access control verification, alongside establishing clear communication protocols and SLAs with the vendor for security incident response. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments, balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with the imperative of maintaining robust security and compliance. The professional is tasked with implementing a new automation workflow that introduces a third-party integration. The challenge lies in the inherent risk associated with external dependencies. Without proper vetting, the integration could introduce vulnerabilities, expose sensitive data, or violate established security policies and regulatory requirements. The pressure to deliver functionality quickly can often lead to shortcuts, making a structured, risk-aware approach critical. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive, risk-based security assessment and integration process. This aligns with best practices in cloud security and compliance, which mandate due diligence for all components, especially third-party integrations. By performing a thorough security review, including vulnerability scanning, code analysis, if applicable, and access control verification, the professional ensures that the integration meets the organization's security posture and regulatory obligations. Establishing clear communication channels with the vendor and defining service-level agreements, SLAs, for security incidents further mitigates risk. This approach demonstrates a commitment to secure development lifecycles and adherence to principles of least privilege and defense in depth, which are fundamental to maintaining a compliant and secure operational environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the integration without any prior security review or vendor vetting represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the principle of due diligence, which is a cornerstone of compliance frameworks. It exposes the organization to potential data breaches, unauthorized access, and non-compliance with data protection regulations. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of responsibility towards safeguarding organizational assets and customer data. Deploying the integration with only a cursory review of the vendor's marketing materials, without technical validation, is also professionally unacceptable. Marketing materials are not a substitute for technical due diligence. This approach fails to identify potential technical vulnerabilities or misconfigurations that could be exploited. It also overlooks the possibility of the vendor's claims not aligning with their actual security practices, leading to a false sense of security and potential compliance gaps. Relying solely on the vendor's self-attestation of compliance without independent verification is another flawed approach. While vendor attestations can be a starting point, they are not sufficient on their own. Regulatory frameworks often require organizations to have a reasonable basis for believing their third-party providers are compliant. This means conducting independent checks, reviewing audit reports, or performing direct assessments to confirm the vendor's claims. Without this, the organization remains exposed to risks and potential penalties for non-compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals in cloud automation must adopt a risk-aware mindset. The decision-making process should involve 1. Risk identification. Proactively identify potential risks associated with new integrations, especially third-party ones. 2. Risk assessment. Evaluate the likelihood and impact of identified risks, considering security, compliance, and operational factors. 3. Risk mitigation. Develop and implement strategies to reduce or eliminate identified risks. This includes technical controls, contractual agreements, and ongoing monitoring. 4. Due diligence. Conduct thorough vetting of all components and vendors, ensuring they meet organizational standards and regulatory requirements. 5. Continuous monitoring. Regularly review and update security and compliance measures as the threat landscape and regulatory environment evolve. This structured approach ensures that innovation and agility are pursued responsibly, without compromising security or compliance. Question 9. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in resource utilization and a slight degradation in response times for critical applications managed by VMware Aria Automation. Which of the following actions represents the most appropriate initial response to proactively manage potential risks? Option A. Assume the performance degradation is temporary and wait for further metrics to confirm a trend before taking action. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential causes, evaluate their impact, and develop mitigation strategies. Option C. Immediately roll back recent configuration changes made within the VMware Aria automation environment to see if performance improves. Option D. Focus solely on optimizing the underlying infrastructure without considering the role of VMware Aria automation in resource allocation and orchestration. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential causes, evaluate their impact, and develop mitigation strategies. Explanation: the performance metrics show a consistent increase in resource utilization and a slight degradation in response times for critical applications managed by VMware Aria automation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a proactive approach to risk management, balancing the need for operational efficiency with the potential for service disruption. Ignoring these early indicators could lead to significant business impact, including application downtime, data loss, and reputational damage. The challenge lies in accurately assessing the root cause and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies before a critical failure occurs, all while adhering to the principles of IT governance and risk management as outlined in relevant frameworks. The correct approach involves a systematic risk assessment process. This begins with identifying the potential risks associated with the observed performance trends, such as resource exhaustion, configuration drift, or underlying infrastructure issues. Next, the likelihood and impact of these risks are evaluated to prioritize them. Finally, mitigation strategies are developed and implemented, which could include capacity planning, performance tuning, automated remediation workflows within Aria automation, or infrastructure upgrades. This approach aligns with best practices in IT service management and cybersecurity, ensuring that potential threats are addressed before they materialize into actual incidents, thereby maintaining service availability and integrity. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the performance metrics as transient fluctuations without further investigation. This failure to conduct a proper risk assessment constitutes a breach of professional duty, as it neglects potential threats to service continuity. Such inaction could be interpreted as a violation of IT governance principles that mandate proactive risk management and adherence to service-level agreements, SLAs. Another incorrect approach is to immediately implement drastic, unverified changes to the Aria automation environment or the underlying infrastructure without a clear understanding of the root cause. This can introduce new, unforeseen risks and potentially exacerbate existing problems, demonstrating a lack of due diligence and a failure to follow a structured problem-solving methodology. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes data-driven analysis and a structured risk assessment. This involves 1. Monitoring and alerting, establishing robust monitoring to capture performance data and setting appropriate thresholds for alerts. 2. Incident triage and analysis, investigating alerts to understand the context and potential causes. 3. Risk identification and assessment, systematically identifying potential risks and evaluating their likelihood and impact. 4. Mitigation planning, developing and prioritizing mitigation strategies. 5. Implementation and validation, executing mitigation plans and verifying their effectiveness. 6. Continuous improvement, regularly reviewing the process and updating risk assessments based on new information. Question 10. To address the challenge of ensuring that all virtual machines deployed through VMware Aria automation adhere to specific organizational security hardening standards and compliance regulations without manual intervention for each request, what is the most effective and compliant approach? Option A. Implement a post-deployment security scanning process that identifies and flags non-compliant resources after they have been provisioned. Option B. Utilize external security scanning tools to audit deployed resources periodically, relying on separate remediation workflows for any identified issues. Option C. Establish a manual review process where a security team inspects each deployment request and its associated blueprint for compliance before approval. Option D. Embed security hardening configurations and compliance checks directly into VMware Aria automation blueprints and leverage policy definitions to enforce these standards during the deployment lifecycle. The correct answer is D. Embed security hardening configurations and compliance checks directly into VMware area automation blueprints and leverage policy definitions to enforce these standards during the deployment lifecycle. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge stemming from the need to balance operational efficiency with robust security and compliance requirements within a VMware area automation environment. The core difficulty lies in the potential for rapid deployment of resources to meet business demands, which can inadvertently create security gaps or violate established governance policies if not managed meticulously. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise long-term security posture and auditability, making careful judgment and adherence to established frameworks paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging VMware area automation's built-in governance and policy enforcement capabilities, specifically through cloud assembly blueprints and policy definitions. This method ensures that security controls, compliance checks, and operational standards are embedded directly into the automation workflows. By defining these requirements as code within the blueprints and associating them with relevant policies, the system automatically enforces them during the deployment lifecycle. This proactive approach aligns with best practices for infrastructure as code ISC and DevSecOps, ensuring that security and compliance are not afterthoughts but integral components of the deployment process. This directly supports the exam's focus on professional implementation and management of VMware area automation, ensuring deployments are secure, compliant, and repeatable. Incorrect approaches analysis. Manually reviewing each deployment request for security compliance before approval represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach is inherently inefficient, prone to human error, and fails to scale with the demands of automated deployments. It bypasses the intended automated governance mechanisms of VMware area automation, creating a significant audit gap and increasing the risk of non-compliant deployments slipping through. Ethically, it fails to uphold the responsibility of ensuring secure and compliant infrastructure. Implementing security checks only after a resource has been deployed and is in production is another critical failure. This reactive approach is costly and disruptive, as it requires remediation of potentially compromised or non-compliant systems. It violates the principle of shift-left security, where security considerations are integrated early in the development and deployment lifecycle. From a regulatory standpoint, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence in preventing security incidents and ensuring ongoing compliance. Relying solely on external security scanning tools without integrating them into the area automation workflow is also problematic. While external tools are valuable for post-deployment validation, they do not prevent the initial deployment of insecure or non-compliant resources. This approach creates a disconnect between the deployment process and the security validation, leading to potential vulnerabilities being exposed before they are detected. It fails to leverage the integrated governance capabilities of area automation, thereby increasing the risk of non-compliance and security breaches. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive, policy-driven approach to managing VMware area automation deployments. This involves understanding the organization's security and compliance requirements and translating them into actionable policies and blueprint configurations within area automation. The decision-making process should prioritize automation of governance and security controls to ensure consistency, scalability, and auditability. When faced with a challenge, professionals should first consult the established governance framework and then determine how to best implement those controls within the area automation platform, rather than seeking manual workarounds or reactive solutions. This ensures alignment with both business objectives and regulatory obligations. Question 11. System analysis indicates that a VMware area automation administrator has identified a critical security vulnerability within a custom workflow designed to provision cloud resources. This workflow, if exploited, could allow unauthorized access to sensitive customer configuration data. The administrator is aware of the organization's strict change management policies, which require extensive testing and approval for any production deployment, and also of the potential reputational damage and compliance violations if customer data is compromised. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the administrator to take? Option A. Continue with the scheduled deployment of the workflow, assuming the vulnerability is unlikely to be exploited. Option B. Attempt to discreetly modify the workflow to patch the vulnerability without informing management or security. Option C. Immediately report the discovered vulnerability through the designated Internal Security Incident Reporting channel. Option D. Publicly disclose the vulnerability on a security forum to alert the wider community. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the discovered vulnerability through the designated Internal Security Incident Reporting channel. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a VMware Area Automation Administrator discovers a potential security vulnerability in a custom workflow that could expose sensitive customer data. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need to address the vulnerability with the established change management processes and the potential impact of an unscheduled deployment. The administrator must exercise sound judgment to determine the most responsible course of action, considering both technical and ethical implications. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the discovered vulnerability through the established internal channels, such as the security team or a designated incident response process. This aligns with best professional practices and ethical obligations to protect customer data and maintain system integrity. Prompt reporting ensures that the vulnerability is assessed by the appropriate experts, a controlled remediation plan can be developed, and any necessary deployments are managed according to established security and operational policies. This proactive stance demonstrates a commitment to security and compliance, minimizing potential harm to customers and the organization. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to attempt to fix the vulnerability independently without proper authorization or documentation. This bypasses established change management and security review processes, increasing the risk of introducing new issues or failing to address the root cause effectively. It also violates organizational policies and potentially regulatory requirements regarding change control and security incident management. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the vulnerability, hoping it will not be discovered or exploited. This is a severe ethical and professional failure. It demonstrates a disregard for customer data protection and organizational security responsibilities, potentially leading to significant data breaches, reputational damage, and legal repercussions. Such inaction is a direct contravention of professional duty of care. A third incorrect approach is to disclose the vulnerability publicly or to unauthorized parties before it has been assessed and remediated by the organization. This could be considered a breach of confidentiality and could alert malicious actors to the vulnerability, increasing the likelihood of exploitation. It undermines the organization's ability to manage the incident responsibly and protect its customers. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a dilemma should follow a structured decision-making process. First, they must recognize the potential impact and ethical implications of the discovery. Second, they should consult internal policies and procedures related to security incidents and change management. Third, they should communicate the findings to the appropriate internal stakeholders without delay, providing clear and concise information. Finally, they should collaborate with the designated teams to ensure a controlled and effective resolution, adhering to all relevant security and compliance frameworks. Question 12. The control framework reveals a critical need to balance developer self-service provisioning of cloud resources with stringent enterprise security and compliance mandates. Given the rapid pace of development and the potential for misconfigurations, what is the most effective approach to ensure that all deployed resources adhere to organizational policies and regulatory requirements without hindering agility? Option A. Grant all users a broad, overly permissive role within VMware Area Automation to simplify the provisioning process and minimize user friction. Option B. Rely solely on manual security reviews and audits conducted by the security team after resources have been provisioned by developers. Option C. Implement granular, role-based access control RBAC, and leverage VMware Area Automation's policy engine for blueprint, lease, and approval policies to enforce governance at the point of consumption. Option D. Disable all security policies and access controls within VMware Area Automation to expedite provisioning and allow developers unrestricted access to resources. The correct answer is C. Implement granular role-based access control RBAC and leverage VMware Area Automation's policy engine for blueprint, lease, and approval policies to enforce governance at the point of consumption. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in cloud automation. balancing the need for rapid deployment and agility with robust security and compliance requirements. The challenge lies in the inherent tension between a developer-centric, self-service model and the enterprise's responsibility to maintain a secure and compliant infrastructure. Without proper controls, self-service provisioning can lead to shadow IT misconfigurations and security vulnerabilities, directly impacting the organization's risk posture. The professional challenge is to design and implement a solution that empowers users while safeguarding the organization's assets and adhering to regulatory mandates. Correct approach analysis, implementing granular role-based access control RBAC, and leveraging VMware Area Automation's policy engine, e.g., blueprint policies, lease policies, approval policies, represents best professional practice. This approach directly addresses the core challenge by enforcing controls at the point of consumption. RBAC ensures that users can only access and provision resources for which they have explicit authorization, preventing unauthorized access and resource sprawl. Policy enforcement, through blueprints and lifecycle management, allows for the definition and automation of compliance checks, security configurations, and resource governance. This proactive, integrated approach aligns with the principle of security by design and ensures that compliance is built into the automation workflow rather than being an afterthought. This aligns with general principles of IT governance and risk management, which emphasize preventative controls and automated enforcement. Incorrect approaches analysis, relying solely on manual security reviews after deployment fails to meet the demands of automated provisioning. This reactive approach is inefficient, prone to human error, and creates a significant lag between deployment and security validation, leaving the environment vulnerable. It also fails to leverage the capabilities of VMware Area Automation for proactive control, representing a failure in efficient resource management and risk mitigation. Disabling all security policies and access controls to expedite provisioning is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This directly contravenes the principles of least privilege and due diligence, exposing the organization to significant security risks, potential data breaches, and non-compliance with industry regulations and internal security standards. It demonstrates a disregard for professional responsibility in safeguarding organizational assets. Implementing a broad, overly permissive role for all users, even with the intention of simplifying access, is also a critical failure. This violates the principle of least privilege, granting users access and capabilities they do not require, thereby increasing the attack surface and the potential for accidental or malicious misconfigurations and unauthorized resource consumption. This approach undermines the integrity of the control framework. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this challenge by first understanding the specific regulatory and compliance requirements applicable to their organization and industry. This understanding should then inform the design of the VMware Area Automation deployment. The decision-making process should prioritize a layered security and governance model, integrating controls directly into the automation workflows. This involves 1. Identifying critical assets and data that require protection. 2. Defining granular roles and permissions based on the principle of least privilege. 3. Leveraging VMware Area Automation's policy engine to automate compliance checks, security configurations, and resource lifecycle management. 4. Implementing robust logging and auditing to track all provisioning activities. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating policies and access controls as requirements evolve. This systematic approach ensures that agility and self-service are enabled within a secure and compliant framework, representing a mature and responsible implementation of cloud automation. Question 13. The evaluation methodology shows that a critical security check during the VMware Area Automation 8.10 deployment has failed. The deployment is otherwise ready to proceed, and the team is under pressure to meet a go-live deadline. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Immediately proceed with the deployment and plan to address the failed security check post-deployment. Option B. Inform the project manager that the deadline cannot be met due to the failed security check and request an extension. Option C. Attempt to manually override the security check to allow the deployment to continue, with the intention of correcting the configuration later. Option D. Halt the deployment, thoroughly investigate the root cause of the failed security check, and only proceed once the check passes or an approved exception with remediation steps is documented. The correct answer is A. Immediately proceed with the deployment and plan to address the failed security check post-deployment. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and adhere to established operational procedures within a regulated environment. The core conflict arises from the pressure to achieve a desired outcome, successful deployment, by potentially circumventing established, documented processes that are in place to ensure security, auditability, and compliance. The temptation to bypass a security check, even with the intention of rectifying it later, introduces significant risks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to the documented, approved, and audited processes for deploying VMware Aria automation. This aligns with the principles of good governance, risk management, and compliance, which are paramount in any professional IT environment, especially one governed by specific regulatory frameworks. By following the established procedure, the professional ensures that the deployment is secure, auditable, and meets all predefined quality and compliance standards. This proactive adherence to policy mitigates potential future issues and upholds the integrity of the system and the organization's compliance posture. An incorrect approach that involves bypassing the security check, even with the intention of immediate remediation, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action directly violates the principle of least privilege and bypasses critical security controls designed to prevent unauthorized access or misconfigurations. It creates a gap in the audit trail, making it difficult to determine the system's state at any given time and potentially masking vulnerabilities. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for established protocols and a willingness to compromise security for expediency, which can lead to data breaches, system instability, and reputational damage. Furthermore, such an action could be in direct violation of internal IT policies and potentially external regulatory requirements mandating secure deployment practices and comprehensive logging. Another incorrect approach, such as proceeding with the deployment without fully understanding the implications of the failed security check, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adequately assess risk. This can lead to deploying a system with known vulnerabilities or misconfigurations, which is inherently insecure and non-compliant. It also shows a lack of commitment to the quality and integrity of the deployment. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. First, clearly identify the deviation from the standard procedure and the potential risks associated with it. Second, consult the relevant documentation, policies, and potentially senior management or a security team to understand the implications of the deviation and the approved remediation steps. Third, prioritize adherence to established processes. If a deviation is absolutely necessary, it must be formally documented, approved through a change control process, and have a clear plan for immediate remediation and verification. The ultimate goal is to ensure that all actions taken are secure, compliant, and auditable. Question 14. Consider a scenario where a development team is experiencing significant delays due to the inability to provision new virtual machines with specific, non-standard configurations in VMware Aria automation. The lead developer, under pressure from management to meet project deadlines, proposes bypassing the standard security review and approval process for these configurations, arguing that the delay is critical and the requested configurations are for a non-production environment. The security team, however, has flagged these configurations as potentially introducing compliance risks based on preliminary assessments. What is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Inform the development team that their request cannot be fulfilled due to security concerns and instruct them to revert to standard approved configurations without further discussion or exploration of alternative solutions. Option B. Proceed with implementing the configurations, but ensure that all network access to these non-production environments is severely restricted and monitored, without formally engaging the security team in the decision-making process. Option C. Initiate a formal exception request process, clearly documenting the business justification, the specific configurations requested, the potential risks identified by the security team, and proposed mitigation strategies. This process should involve direct consultation with both the development and security teams to reach a mutually agreeable solution, potentially including temporary approvals with strict oversight and a plan for remediation or standardization. Option D. Implement the requested configurations immediately in the non-production environment as proposed by the development team, with a commitment to inform the security team after the fact and address any identified issues retrospectively. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal exception request process, clearly documenting the business justification, the specific configurations requested, the potential risks identified by the security team, and proposed mitigation strategies. This process should involve direct consultation with both the development and security teams to reach a mutually agreeable solution, potentially including temporary approvals with strict oversight and a plan for remediation or standardization. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge related to managing stakeholder expectations and ensuring compliance within the context of VMware Area Automation 8.10 Professional. The core difficulty lies in balancing the immediate operational needs of the development team with the long-term strategic and governance requirements of the security and compliance teams. Misalignment on these priorities can lead to security vulnerabilities, audit failures, and project delays. Careful judgment is required to identify the most effective path forward that satisfies all critical stakeholder groups. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, collaborative, and documented process for addressing security concerns. By engaging all relevant stakeholders, conducting a thorough risk assessment, and implementing approved remediation steps, it ensures that changes are made in a controlled manner that aligns with established security policies and regulatory frameworks. This proactive and transparent method minimizes risk, fosters trust between teams, and demonstrates due diligence in maintaining a secure and compliant environment, which is paramount in regulated industries. An incorrect approach that bypasses established security review processes and directly implements changes based on a perceived operational urgency is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical lapse because it disregards established governance controls designed to protect sensitive data and systems. Such an action can lead to the introduction of vulnerabilities, non-compliance with security standards e.g. ISO 27001, NIST CSF, or specific industry regulations, and potential breaches. It undermines the authority of the security team and creates a precedent for circumventing critical controls, thereby increasing the organization's overall risk posture. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing changes without proper documentation or communication is also professionally unsound. This lack of transparency and traceability hinders auditing efforts, makes it difficult to troubleshoot issues, and prevents the security team from accurately assessing the impact of the changes. It violates principles of good IT governance and can lead to noncompliance with audit requirements and internal policies, as it creates an opaque operational environment. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of organizational policies and regulatory requirements. When faced with conflicting priorities, professionals should initiate a formal change management process. This typically includes identifying the need for change, assessing the impact, including security and compliance implications, proposing solutions, obtaining necessary approvals from all relevant stakeholders, including security and compliance, implementing the approved changes in a controlled manner, and documenting all actions taken. If immediate action is deemed critical, a documented exception process with clear justification and temporary mitigation strategies should be followed, with a commitment to formalizing the change as soon as possible. Question 15. The investigation demonstrates that the IT operations team is advocating for a highly centralized, manual approval process for all cloud resource deployments to ensure immediate cost control and adherence to existing infrastructure standards, while the development team is pushing for fully automated, self-service provisioning of a wide range of cloud services to accelerate application delivery cycles. Considering the regulatory framework governing data handling and security for this organization, which approach best balances these competing stakeholder demands while ensuring compliance? Option A. Implement a strict, centralized manual approval workflow for all cloud resource requests, managed solely by the IT operations team, to guarantee immediate cost adherence and prevent unauthorized resource provisioning, regardless of development team timelines. Option B. Establish a federated governance model for VMware Area Automation 8.10 that defines standardized, policy-driven blueprints and workflows, incorporating automated compliance checks and role-based access controls, allowing developers self-service within defined guardrails, and requiring operational review only for exceptions or high-risk deployments. Option C. Develop custom, ad hoc automation scripts for each development team's specific needs, bypassing the central VMware Area Automation 8.10 platform to expedite deployments, with the expectation that operations will retroactively audit and enforce compliance. Option D. Grant the development team full administrative privileges within VMware Area Automation 8.10 to enable unrestricted self-service provisioning, trusting their ability to manage costs and compliance independently. Correct answer is B. Establish a federated governance model for VMware Area Automation 8.10 that defines standardized, policy-driven blueprints and workflows, incorporating automated compliance checks and role-based access controls, allowing developers self-service within defined guardrails, and requiring operational review only for exceptions or high-risk deployments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge stemming from conflicting stakeholder priorities regarding the implementation of VMware Area Automation 8.10. The IT operations team is focused on immediate cost savings and operational efficiency, while the development team prioritizes rapid deployment and feature velocity. This divergence can lead to suboptimal architectural decisions if not managed carefully, potentially impacting long-term scalability, security, and compliance. The challenge lies in balancing these competing demands within the constraints of the regulatory framework, which mandates adherence to specific security and data handling protocols. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a collaborative governance model that establishes clear policies and standards for cloud automation. This aligns with best practices for managing complex IT environments and ensures that the implementation of VMware Area Automation 8.10 adheres to the established regulatory framework. By defining reusable blueprints, standardized workflows, and automated compliance checks, the organization can empower developers with self-service capabilities while maintaining control and visibility for operations. This approach fosters a balance between agility and governance, ensuring that deployments are both efficient and compliant with all relevant regulations. This is best professional practice as it proactively addresses potential risks and ensures that technology adoption supports business objectives without compromising regulatory obligations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Prioritizing the IT operations team's immediate cost-saving measures without considering the development team's need for agility would lead to a rigid and inefficient automation platform. This could result in workarounds, shadow IT, and ultimately, a failure to achieve the full benefits of automation, potentially creating compliance gaps if manual processes bypass automated controls. Focusing solely on the development team's desire for rapid deployment without establishing robust governance and security guardrails would expose the organization to significant risks. This could lead to non-compliant deployments, data breaches, and an inability to audit or manage the automated environment effectively, directly violating regulatory requirements. Implementing a solution that requires extensive manual intervention for compliance checks would negate the benefits of automation and introduce human error. This approach is inefficient, costly, and highly susceptible to regulatory noncompliance due to the inherent unreliability of manual processes in a dynamic cloud environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, identifying potential compliance and operational risks associated with different implementation strategies. This involves engaging all relevant stakeholders early in the process to understand their requirements and constraints. A thorough assessment of the regulatory framework's mandates, particularly concerning data security, access control, and auditability, is crucial. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that offer a balance of agility, security, and compliance, leveraging automation to enforce policies rather than relying on manual oversight. Establishing a clear governance framework with defined roles, responsibilities, and approval workflows is essential for managing the lifecycle of automated deployments and ensuring ongoing adherence to regulations. Question 16. Upon reviewing the proposed upgrade of VMware Area Automation 8.10, which of the following methodologies represents the most comprehensive and risk-averse approach to assessing its potential impact on existing cloud automation deployments and operational workflows? Option A. Conducting a thorough review of the update's release notes, analyzing compatibility with existing integrations and custom scripts, forming impact analysis on critical blueprints and workflows, and validating changes in a dedicated test environment before production deployment. Option B, implementing the update in production, and then addressing any issues that arise based on user feedback and operational monitoring. Option C, proceeding with the upgrade directly to production, assuming the vendor's release notes guarantee full backward compatibility and minimal disruption. Option D, relying exclusively on the vendor's marketing materials and high-level feature descriptions to gauge the update's suitability for the current environment. The correct answer is A, conducting a thorough review of the update's release notes, analyzing compatibility with existing integrations and custom scripts, performing impact analysis on critical blueprints and workflows, and validating changes in a dedicated test environment before production deployment. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments where the introduction of new services or significant changes to existing ones can have unforeseen consequences. The professional is tasked with evaluating the potential impact of a proposed VMware Aria Automation 8.10 update on existing deployments and workflows. The challenge lies in balancing the benefits of the update e.g., new features, security enhancements, against the risks of disruption, performance degradation, or incompatibility with current operational processes. A thorough impact assessment is crucial to ensure business continuity, maintain service levels, and avoid costly remediation efforts. The need for a structured and comprehensive approach is paramount, as a superficial assessment could lead to significant operational issues. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and multifaceted impact assessment that considers technical, operational, and business implications. This includes analyzing the update's release notes for compatibility issues with existing Aria automation components, custom scripts, and integrated third-party tools. It also necessitates evaluating potential changes to resource provisioning, blueprint functionality, and approval workflows. Furthermore, a robust assessment would involve testing the update in a non-production environment to identify and mitigate any unforeseen issues before deploying to production. This aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation, ensuring that the update is implemented in a controlled and predictable manner, thereby upholding service integrity and operational stability. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the update without a formal impact assessment is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Bypasses essential risk management protocols, potentially leading to service disruptions, data loss, or security vulnerabilities, which could violate service-level agreements and internal governance policies. Relying solely on vendor documentation without independent validation is also problematic. While vendor documentation is a starting point, it may not account for specific environmental configurations or custom integrations, leading to a false sense of security and overlooking critical dependencies. Ignoring feedback from operational teams during the assessment phase is another failure. These teams possess invaluable on-the-ground knowledge of current system behavior and potential pain points, and their input is vital for a comprehensive understanding of the update's real-world implications. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach impact assessments by first understanding the scope and objectives of the proposed change. This involves gathering all relevant documentation, including release notes, architectural diagrams, and current operational procedures. Next, a risk identification and analysis phase should be conducted, considering technical compatibility, performance implications, security considerations, and operational workflows. This should be followed by a mitigation planning phase, outlining steps to address identified risks. Finally, a validation and testing phase in a controlled environment is essential before any production deployment. This structured decision-making process ensures that changes are implemented responsibly and with minimal disruption. Question 17. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive approach to integrating new VMware Aria automation workflows. When evaluating a proposed workflow that leverages third-party integrations for enhanced functionality but introduces potential security concerns, which of the following represents the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Proceed with the workflow deployment after a brief review of the vendor's security documentation, prioritizing rapid implementation to realize immediate operational benefits. Option B. Conduct a thorough security risk assessment of the third-party integrations, Implement necessary security controls and policy enforcement within VMware Area Automation, and then deploy the workflow. Option C. Reject the workflow entirely due to the presence of any third-party integrations, opting for a less efficient but entirely internally managed solution. Option D. Deploy the workflow immediately and address any security issues that arise post-deployment, assuming the benefits of speed outweigh potential risks. The correct answer is A. Proceed with the workflow deployment after a brief review of the vendor's security documentation, prioritizing rapid implementation to realize immediate operational benefits. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation, balancing the desire for rapid deployment and innovation with the imperative of maintaining robust security and compliance. The professional is tasked with implementing a new automation workflow that, while offering significant operational efficiencies, introduces potential security risks due to its reliance on external, unvetted integrations. The challenge lies in making a decision that optimizes for both speed and security, adhering to the principles of least privilege and defense in depth, which are foundational to secure cloud operations. The correct approach prioritizes a thorough risk assessment and the implementation of appropriate security controls before full deployment. This aligns with best practices in cloud security and compliance, emphasizing a proactive rather than reactive stance. By integrating security into the early stages of the automation lifecycle, the professional ensures that potential vulnerabilities are identified and mitigated, thereby protecting sensitive data and maintaining the integrity of the cloud environment. This approach is ethically sound as it upholds the responsibility to protect organizational assets and comply with relevant regulations, which mandate secure handling of data and systems. An incorrect approach that bypasses security reviews in favor of speed introduces unacceptable risks. This failure to conduct due diligence can lead to regulatory noncompliance, as many frameworks require documented security assessments and adherence to established security baselines. Ethically, it represents a dereliction of duty, potentially exposing the organization to data breaches, financial penalties, and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which relies solely on the vendor's security claims without independent verification, is also problematic. While vendor assurances are important, they do not absolve the organization of its responsibility to perform its own risk assessments and ensure that the implemented solutions meet its specific security requirements and regulatory obligations. This can lead to a false sense of security and leave critical gaps unaddressed. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that includes 1. Identifying the problem and its potential impact. 2. Gathering relevant information, including security and compliance requirements. 3. Evaluating alternative solutions based on risk, cost, and benefit. 4. Selecting the best course of action. And 5. Implementing and monitoring the chosen solution. In this context, the decision-making process must explicitly incorporate security and compliance checkpoints at each stage of the automation lifecycle. Question 18. Examination of the data shows that a new project requires rapid deployment of virtual machines across multiple cloud endpoints, some of which have strict data residency requirements. The team is under pressure to deliver these resources within a tight deadline, and there is a risk that standard compliance checks might slow down the provisioning process. What is the most effective and compliant approach to ensure that all deployed resources adhere to data residency regulations while still enabling efficient automation? Option A. Manually audit each deployed virtual machine for data residency compliance after the provisioning process is complete. Option B. Configure and enforce data residency policies within VMware Area Automation blueprints and deployments to automatically validate and restrict resource placement. Option C. Expedite the deployment by temporarily bypassing data residency checks for all resources in this project. Option D. Develop and run custom scripts to check data residency compliance on deployed resources, independent of the area automation workflow. The correct answer is B. Configure and enforce data residency policies within VMware Area Automation blueprints and deployments to automatically validate and restrict resource placement. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments where the need for rapid deployment and resource provisioning can sometimes conflict with stringent regulatory compliance requirements. The core tension lies in balancing the agility offered by VMware Area Automation with the imperative to maintain auditable trails and adhere to data residency laws. The professional challenge is to implement automation effectively without inadvertently creating compliance gaps or security vulnerabilities that could lead to significant penalties, reputational damage, and operational disruptions. The pressure to deliver services quickly can lead to shortcuts that, while seemingly efficient in the short term, undermine long-term compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging VMware Aria Automation's built-in capabilities for policy enforcement and governance. Specifically, utilizing Cloud Assembly's policy framework to define and enforce compliance rules at the blueprint and deployment stages is paramount. This ensures that all deployed resources adhere to predefined standards, such as data residency requirements, security configuration, and resource tagging for auditability. By integrating compliance checks directly into the automation workflow, organizations can achieve both speed and adherence to regulatory frameworks. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of noncompliance by embedding controls at the point of creation, making it the most robust and professionally sound method for maintaining regulatory adherence in an automated cloud environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. Manually verifying compliance after deployment is a reactive and inefficient approach. It introduces a significant delay between resource provisioning and compliance validation, increasing the window of exposure to noncompliance. This method is prone to human error and is not scalable, making it professionally unacceptable for a dynamic cloud environment. It fails to meet the spirit of automated compliance and creates an auditability gap. Implementing custom scripts to check compliance post-deployment, without integrating them into the Aria automation workflow, suffers from similar drawbacks to manual verification. These scripts are often developed in isolation, may not cover all compliance aspects comprehensively, and their execution is not guaranteed to be timely or consistent. This approach lacks the integrated governance that Aria automation provides, leading to potential blind spots and an inability to prevent non-compliant deployments from occurring in the first place. Ignoring data residency requirements to expedite deployment is a direct violation of regulatory frameworks and constitutes a severe ethical and legal failure. This approach prioritizes speed over fundamental compliance obligations, exposing the organization to significant legal repercussions, fines, and loss of trust. It demonstrates a profound lack of professional responsibility and a disregard for established governance principles. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and integrated approach to compliance within VMware Aria Automation. This involves understanding the specific regulatory requirements applicable to the organization's data and operations. The decision-making process should prioritize the use of native governance and policy features within Aria Automation to embed compliance checks into the automation lifecycle. When faced with a conflict between speed and compliance, the professional should always advocate for the compliance solution, seeking to optimize the automation workflow to meet both objectives rather than compromising on regulatory adherence. This requires a thorough understanding of the platform's capabilities and a commitment to best practices in cloud governance. Question 19. System analysis indicates that a financial services organization is leveraging VMware Aria Automation 8.10 to automate the provisioning of cloud infrastructure for new customer onboarding processes. This process involves deploying virtual machines, databases, and network configurations. Given the stringent data privacy and security regulations applicable to financial data, what is the most effective approach to ensure that all provisioned resources inherently comply with these regulatory mandates from the moment of deployment? Option A. Integrate automated compliance checks and policy enforcement directly into the VMware Aria Automation blueprints and service catalog items. Option B. Utilize a separate, third-party compliance scanning tool that runs independently of the provisioning workflow to identify deviations. Option C. Prioritize rapid resource deployment for customer onboarding and address compliance requirements in subsequent operational phases. Option D. Conduct manual compliance audits of all provisioned resources on a weekly basis after the onboarding process is complete. The correct answer is A. Integrate automated compliance checks and policy enforcement directly into the VMware Aria Automation blueprints and service catalog items. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in cloud automation environments where the rapid deployment of resources can outpace the establishment of robust governance and compliance controls. The professional is tasked with ensuring that the automated provisioning of VMware Area automation resources adheres to specific regulatory requirements, which in this context are assumed to be aligned with a hypothetical but representative set of data privacy and security standards applicable to cloud services. The challenge lies in balancing the agility offered by automation with the imperative of regulatory adherence, preventing potential data breaches, unauthorized access, or non-compliance penalties. The need for a proactive, integrated approach to compliance is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves embedding compliance checks directly into the VMware Area automation workflow, specifically within the blueprint or service catalog item. This ensures that before any resource is provisioned, it is validated against predefined compliance policies. This could involve integrating with policy as code tools or leveraging built-in area automation extensibility features, like extensibility tasks or event broker subscriptions, to trigger compliance checks. This method represents best professional practice because it automates compliance, making it scalable and consistent. It aligns with the principle of compliance by design, where security and regulatory requirements are considered from the outset of the automation process, rather than being an afterthought. This proactive stance minimizes risk and reduces the likelihood of deploying non-compliant infrastructure. Incorrect approaches analysis. Manually reviewing each deployed resource for compliance after provisioning is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach is reactive, prone to human error, and not scalable for automated deployments. It fails to meet the spirit of regulatory frameworks that emphasize continuous monitoring and proactive risk management. Relying solely on post-deployment audits creates a window of vulnerability where non-compliant resources can exist undetected, potentially leading to data breaches or regulatory penalties. Implementing a separate, disconnected compliance scanning tool that operates independently of the provisioning workflow also presents regulatory and ethical issues. While such tools can identify issues, their lack of integration means they cannot prevent the initial deployment of non-compliant resources. This creates a gap between detection and remediation, increasing risk. Furthermore, it fails to leverage the automation platform's capabilities to enforce compliance at the point of creation, which is a more effective and efficient control mechanism. Ignoring compliance requirements altogether in favor of speed and agility is the most severe regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a disregard for data protection laws, security standards, and organizational policies. It exposes the organization to substantial legal liabilities, financial penalties, and reputational damage. Such an approach is fundamentally unprofessional and unethical, as it prioritizes expediency over the safeguarding of sensitive data and the integrity of the IT environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this domain must adopt a risk-based approach to compliance. This involves understanding the specific regulatory landscape applicable to the data being processed and the services being offered. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that integrate compliance into the automation lifecycle. This means evaluating how VMware Area Automation's features can be leveraged to enforce policies, validate configurations, and ensure that deployed resources meet defined security and regulatory baselines. When faced with choices, the professional should always select the option that embeds controls at the earliest possible stage of the resource lifecycle, thereby minimizing the attack surface and the potential for non-compliance. Continuous learning and staying updated on evolving regulatory requirements are also crucial. Question 20. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a critical customer-facing application is experiencing intermittent failures, impacting revenue generation. A proposed temporary workaround involves granting elevated privileges to a broader set of support personnel to access and modify customer data directly, bypassing standard change control and data sanitization processes. This workaround is intended to be in place for 48 hours until a permanent fix can be deployed. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Implement the workaround by granting the necessary elevated privileges to the support personnel, but instruct them to avoid accessing or modifying any customer data unless absolutely critical, and to document all actions taken. Option B. Refuse to implement the workaround due to the inherent security and compliance risks, and inform stakeholders that the application will remain unavailable until the permanent fix is ready, regardless of revenue impact. Option C. Proceed with the workaround immediately to minimize revenue loss, as the business impact is severe, and address documentation and permanent fix planning after service is restored. Option D. Implement the workaround after obtaining verbal approval from a senior manager, documenting the temporary access granted and the duration, and immediately initiating the process for a permanent fix. The correct answer is D. Implement the workaround after obtaining verbal approval from a senior manager, documenting the temporary access granted and the duration, and immediately initiating the process for a permanent fix. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in IT operations, where a perceived immediate business need conflicts with established security protocols and data privacy regulations. The challenge lies in balancing the urgency of a critical business function with the responsibility to protect sensitive customer data and maintain system integrity. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to shortcuts that bypass necessary security reviews, potentially exposing the organization to significant risks, including data breaches, regulatory fines, and reputational damage. The decision maker must navigate this pressure while adhering to professional ethics and compliance requirements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, risk-informed decision-making process that prioritizes compliance and security. This means engaging the appropriate stakeholders, including the security team and legal counsel, to assess the risks associated with the proposed workaround. Documenting the temporary solution, its limitations, and the plan for remediation ensures accountability and provides an audit trail. This approach aligns with best practices for incident response and change management, emphasizing that even temporary deviations from standard procedures must be controlled and justified. It upholds the principle of least privilege and data minimization, ensuring that any access granted is strictly necessary and time-bound. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a workaround without proper authorization or risk assessment bypasses critical security controls. This directly violates principles of data protection and system security, potentially leading to unauthorized access or modification of sensitive information. Such an action could result in significant regulatory penalties under data privacy laws, as it demonstrates a failure to implement adequate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data. Granting broad access to sensitive data to a wider group of individuals than strictly necessary for the immediate fix is a clear violation of data minimization and the principle of least privilege. This increases the attack surface and the likelihood of accidental or malicious data exposure, which is a serious regulatory and ethical breach. Ignoring the need for a documented plan for permanent remediation and relying solely on the temporary workaround creates a persistent vulnerability. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to address the root cause of the issue, leaving the system susceptible to future incidents and potentially violating ongoing compliance obligations to maintain secure systems. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such dilemmas should follow a systematic approach. 1. Understand the immediate business impact and the technical nature of the problem. 2. Identify all relevant security policies, compliance requirements, and data privacy regulations. 3. Consult with relevant teams, security, legal, compliance to assess risks and explore compliance solutions. 4. Document all decisions, justifications, and temporary measures taken. 5. Develop and implement a plan for permanent remediation. This structured process ensures that business needs are met responsibly without compromising security or regulatory compliance.